Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Plymouth. I am your host, Derek Brindisi, and your town manager. This week I've asked Christian Horvath, the town's emergency management director, to join us and talk about all good things as it relates to emergency management. Unfortunately, we did invite Chief Foley to attend, but apparently he had more important things to do than hang out with us for 30 minutes, Chris.
Chief has other things that he has to take care of.
He's a busy man, so hopefully we'll get him back here in the future. So Chris, again, you're the emergency management director, and there's a lot of responsibilities that come with that. But you've only been here for a short period of time. I know I've only been here for just about a year now. So can you just give everyone out there who's paying attention a little bit of your background, where you came from, how long you've been here for, and some of your experiences?
Yes, sir. So I started the week of October 13th of 2021, right when we had the pop-up nor'easter.
Wow. Okay.
So what is that, about 15 months? I am originally from Long Island, New York. I am a Mets fan.
Sorry.
No. I am a Mets fan. But 1986 was your fault. We just happened to reap the benefits from it. I was in the Coast Guard for 20 years. I went in 2001, and I did a lot of time up in New England.
How many years?
20 years.
20. Oh, so you retired in the Coast Guard?
I was active duty for 20 continuous years, and we moved to Plymouth in 2009. So the wife and kids have been here ever since. I moved around a little bit while finishing my career, and we knew we were going to stay in Plymouth when I was going to retire. So this job became available, and it was a perfect fit.
So, not to get too personal, but were you on active duty serving in the Coast Guard and living in Plymouth for a period of time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. From 2009, at first I was stationed down on Otis, and I did 4 years in an instructor billet. And then I was in Kittery, Maine on a 270-foot boat for 3 years.
Wow.
Then I was in Boston, and after that I was down in Miami for a deployable team before I came back up to Boston, and the wife and kids stayed here throughout the entire time.
And what did you do in the Coast Guard?
I did law enforcement.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
I
Gotcha.
did counter narcotics, illegal aliens, migration, Homeland Security, fisheries rules and regulations in the North Atlantic. Obviously, that's a very prominent business up here, so that's what brought us up here. And then we decided to stay.
Yeah, it's a great area. So, again, with your military background, 20 years of service to this country, that's great. A lot of, clearly, ICS, NIMS training. You guys probably did a lot of planning and preparations around certain events that were probably coming your way, which to me would lead you be a perfect candidate to the role you're playing now for the town.
Yeah, because at the time, ICS was kind of forced on us at a young age in the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard loves ICS, loves NIMS. And so when those were requirements for the emergency management field, I slowly realized that I already had them. I had a lot of the experience of working with different federal agencies from over the years. So the transition was, I don't want to say seamless, but it wasn't nearly as difficult as I had anticipated.
Right. And so for the folks at home who are listening throughout these acronyms, ICS is the Incident Command Structure, and NIMS is the National Incident Management System. So in Chris, your role as the emergency manager, those are the systems that we all have to work. Those are the constructs we have to work within.
Yeah, those are the systems that fire departments, police departments, public health administrators, DPW, they are all learning those systems so we can have commonality and everybody knows the terms, when needed.
Right. So as we head towards winter, which I think really, you wouldn't realize it, but we're actually in the middle of winter, although I think today it's about 52 degrees.
That's awesome.
You under the direction of Chief Foley, again, was where emergency management lies, organized a meeting. It was probably, 3 or 4 weeks ago now.
Yeah, it was right before Christmas.
Right, and so that was a meeting, you pulled all the different varying departments together to talk about winter preparations. You want to talk a little bit about what came out of that meeting and some of the goals from that meeting?
Absolutely. So, yes, we fall under the fire department, even though I'm not a firefighter, nor have I ever been. We are a division of the fire department. At the Emergency Operations Center down in Cedarville, we pulled everybody together, yourself, assistant town manager, police chief, DPW, fire department, finance department, all to discuss how we respond to weather, winter events that we know eventually are going to come. Right. Hopefully, they're not as bad as last January 29th.
That's right.
But unfortunately, chances are we're going to get a decent snowstorm. So we talk about how our response is going to be, how we are able to have different departments track their involvement, whether it's their contractors, whether it's the equipment that's utilized, how we're going to get the finance strings, because everything comes back to money, and how we're going to communicate throughout those storms, where we're going to open a shelter if needed, do we have supplies, do we have volunteers, do we have coordination with the Red Cross in the event that any of those things are needed. Because the end goal is always, after one of those storms, it becomes the job of the emergency management division, myself and the administrative assistant, Ronnie, to then track those expenses. Once it's declared a big enough storm where we hit records, right? We had to hit a record amount of snowfall. Right. Then we can track, then we work with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, who sends it down to the state level, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, and we start putting a package together of all those numbers, and we seek reimbursement. For that last January storm, for instance, it was declared large enough. We did hit those record snowfall amounts, and we were able to work with them, and it was a pretty long process. As you can imagine, just think about all DPW and all their contractors and all the snowplows. Every piece of equipment that has to be utilized. Then we have to, know the locations, know who used it, how long, what the price code is attached to each one.
Right.
And we get all that package together, and we submit it through your office, and for final review goes to MEMA and then on to FEMA. And we were awarded 75%, which is the standard. They don't go any higher than 75% of the total cost that the town will now get reimbursed from that storm and all the expenses that had occurred.
And I think we just got notice of that reimbursement, which was a year ago, right? I mean, that was so. I mean, so that process that you just talked about, it took well over a year from the day of the event up until cataloging the equipment, the personnel used for that event.
Correct.
To final reimbursement.
Correct. So the storm was January 29th is when it started. And then it got declared, I believe that storm, for instance, got declared afterwards, that it became Winter Storm Keenan. So when federal gets involved and they start going through their processes, then they decide what towns and counties reach those threshold numbers. Then they reach out. Then they assign their personnel to meet with the affected towns. So that all takes a large amount of time. So we didn't actually start working with FEMA until, I believe, May. And then May and June put it together, finishing touches with MEMA in July, submitted in August, and now, we will be getting reimbursed in the future. They haven't set an exact date.
So when I look at emergency management, like the division of emergency management, I look at, you guys have two primary roles. Like one is actually it's really three. One is preparation, right?
Correct.
So preparing for an event, and then I guess the second phase would be helping coordinate the response to an event, right? And then what you just described is like kind of the recovery process, is the financial piece. But can we talk a little bit about preparation? So in two aspects. One, what your role is in preparing the town as an agency to respond. And then number two, if we have time, what folks can do for themselves to prepare themselves for these types of events, whether they lose power or, things of that nature.
So I will say this with power before I get another train of thought and I totally forget it. With Eversource, the largest thing you can do is report your outage. Don't assume because your whole neighborhood is out that Bill and Nancy across the street reported it and you don't have to. You always want to report your outage as well, because it'll still ping in their system. As far as with the public, earlier on in the season than we met at the town level, I went to the Center for Active Living and spoke with them, tried to give them some winter tips as far as technology, cell phones. Those are the biggest thing. Always maintain, as much of a charge as you can.
Right.
My wife likes to put the heat up to begin with, but when we know there's going to be a storm and there's a possibility, we try to raise it a little bit so it doesn't get too cold at night while you're waiting for restoration from Eversource. A good tip I heard this year that I had never heard of was boiling a pot of water.
Okay.
Because that kicks off extra heat, and it's not going to heat your whole house,
Right.
but if you're downstairs in the kitchen or the dining room, whatnot. Batteries, radios, which most people don't even have anymore.
Yeah, right.
So you can listen to the radio, you can get updated weather, stuff like that. There's no reason to not go with friends and family. Obviously, if they have a generator, make sure your generator is in a well-ventilated area,
Right.
not
good
inside,
point.
not inside the garage, obviously away from everything that it could be. So those are the outreach that we do from that. Now, the other planning that we do is, as a town, and every other town has a comprehensive emergency management plan, the SEMP. And it's my version of our Bible. It's, what the town uses, and it lays out the possibilities for flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes, and what the town's response is going to be for that. It has to be updated every 5 years.
Okay.
And then the majority of those are because a lot of the key players change. So a lot of it is we put the titles rather than the individuals' names, just so we don't have to update it, as often. But we have it certified through MEMA, and then MEMA puts it on their web EOC, which is their integrated program that they can always pull up, and they can see what we have for a SEMP, and they can offer different avenues if needed. But that's also the program utilized during these events to request any kind of assistance, whether it's we need to borrow a generator from another town or we need tree and line crews from a different DPW. So that's their one-stop shop for their web program. So we utilize that. The other thing we did for preparation this year was we held a sheltering class down at the EOC, and it was very quick notice. It was a quick turnaround this year. But we were able to get MEMA to sponsor it and send their personnel down to instruct it. And we had 11 townspeople, whether they were town employees looking for something that they could offer, after work. Some of them were our EOC volunteers that we already have in our, bench, so to speak, to help out when needed. But the benefit of that is, with 11 people, we can run our own shelter without having to reach out to American Red Cross or another agency, because volunteer numbers are very low ever since the pandemic, especially from the Red Cross. They've told us that they struggle with those numbers as well. So if we can be able to sustain at a town of our size and our level, it only benefits us to be able to support ourselves to begin with.
Yeah, and that was a great takeaway from the meeting that you organized in December when we started talking about shelter operations, and you had shared the January 29th story with the group of the town having to open up its own shelter and rely on the American Red Cross to come in. And I didn't realize that 11 individuals signed up for that shelter operations, because that was just an idea in December, and here we are less than 4 weeks later, and now we have a shelter team of 11 people that you can call upon. And in my experience, and when I had worked in Worcester, I had worked 2 years doing emergency preparedness under this federal system. And I remember we had a whole group of Medical Reserve Corps volunteers, and we would go around telling people, oh, we have 1,200 people signed up for this system. But then when there was a problem or an event, you reach into that Rolodex and nobody was responding. So the numbers look great on paper,
yes,
but it didn't work. So to me, it sounds like you put together a plan that's going to work, that if we need to open up a shelter, we have a group of people that are going to show up and they're going to be there to help support those folks in need.
And that was with only a quick turnaround. By the time we got the approval from MEMA to then actually host that class was only 5 or 6 days. So in the springtime, we're going to do it again, and we're going to make sure to get it out on social media, to the general public as quick as we can, and give them as much time as possible, and really just see how many people we can get.
Right, and have them sign up. So that takes us back to individual family preparation. And so you mentioned a couple of good ideas that folks should be aware of, like make sure you have your batteries stored. I mean, your house, it sounds like your wife is already fully prepared, probably living with you. You guys probably live in a bunker when it comes to some of this stuff, but...
Not even a little bit. I'm at work when this happens.
But, so if we had to open up a shelter here in town,
Yep.
like the January 29th event of last year, where would that be? Where would the shelter be located?
Our primary location is Plymouth North High School.
Okay.
The location near the center of town, with BID being right there, the Center for Active Living being right there, it works well for us. So,
And the school has a generator? Does the school
yes,
okay, they do.
school has a generator.
So they're always operational.
And they also have the custodial staff. They have the food workers. So that takes a lot of the pressure off of the extra volunteers. So Dr. Campbell's staff and the facilities director will get that running while we get the items there for a shelter, as far as the cots, the blankets, stuff like that. And then our personnel, or last year was the Red Cross, would run the intake and the processing and getting people situated. And what we were also able to do last year was assist with transportation. Because the snow started coming down so quick and so heavy last year, Harbor Master, Department of Natural Resources, they were able to assist with their four-wheel drives. And we basically set up our own little internal dispatch. When somebody would call the EOC requesting transportation, the Harbor Master would take care of it with his guys and gals and get people to the shelter.
Which is very unique. When I heard that story a few weeks back, I thought, wow, that's a great out-of-the-box creative way of using town resources to help people in need. And so, and again, that was the Harbor Master's office. The Natural Resource Office is led by David Gould and his team. Now, were those trips to the shelter, or they were just to anywhere folks needed a ride? No,
they were shelter specific.
Okay.
And they would also let the residents know that we can get you to the shelter. If your power comes on within a half an hour, we can't necessarily turn around to get you home.
Right.
We can guarantee you the ride to the shelter.
Right.
And when we can, then we'll worry about transportation back. We just have to make sure you're safe now.
Right. And how many people? Usually, we always talk about opening up shelters, and they're a great idea. They help people that are most in need at that moment. But oftentimes, in my experience, you'd open up a shelter and you'd only have a couple people use that shelter. How many folks use the shelter?
I believe 27 was the final number last year. 27 people.
27 people use the shelter. Wow.
Yeah, and it operated for one night, and then by noontime the next day is when we had decided that it was time to close the shelter. We gave everybody enough notice.
Really? Okay, well, I didn't realize that. That's a huge turnout. My biggest shelter operation was in Worcester during the 2008 ice storms, and that was used. But what I find interesting in Plymouth is that unlike my prior experience, the school department is very actively engaged in emergency preparedness and helping the town respond. I've never seen. Dr. Campbell attended that meeting, and his facilities team attended that meeting, and they were very engaged, like basically saying, whatever you guys need during those times, just give us a call. So again, that was great for me to hear, because that hadn't been my experience, and I had worked in other communities. So.
We wouldn't have been able to pull it off in that particular instance, and I don't think we would be able to moving forward if we did not have their support.
Right.
Because having the facilities there, the food, that's just a large piece of any kind of shelter operation.
So, for the folks listening at home, we have a lot of great preparedness tips. We talked a lot about where the shelter would be if we have to open it. Where can folks, that want to learn more about the things that we're doing to help protect this community, where can they go to learn that information?
So like everybody else with social media, my office, Plymouth Office of Emergency Management, has a Facebook page. Plymouth Fire Department has a Facebook page, as well as Town of Plymouth, their Facebook page. Also, PlymouthFire.org. Is the fire department's website, and we try to get out as much information, any kind of press release, anything like that. And then we reach out to your office and Anthony to do any kind of cross dissemination, and to make sure that it gets out as many avenues as we can.
Yeah, and that's one thing we had talked about at your meeting, that this coming winter season, that we really want to do as much as we possibly can to communicate to the community. I remember during this time last year, folks were calling me, although I had just accepted the position, was saying, hey, where can we get information? And we talked about that, okay, what are other ways we can get information out to the community? So, we're going to continue to work on that, and that's really how the 311 system became a thing. We're a lot of bigger communities, and Plymouth is a big community. Let's not fool ourselves. This 311 system, we're hoping to get this thing launched by February 1st, and this is going to be a portal in which the community, especially during like a weather event, can log on. They can enter a down tree or a down power line, or we know we want folks to call Eversource if they don't have power, not to call us necessarily. But there's a lot of other things that are happening in the community that are separate from not having power. So this 311 system will give us all the information that we need to mobilize resources as quickly as possible.
And hopefully it won't overburden 911 and the police department. They can utilize this separately.
Right. That's a really good point. So when we were sitting down at the EOC, there seemed like there was a lot of work taking place as far as maybe bringing it up to the 21st century, a lot of EOC upgrades. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Sure. So we're very lucky in the town of Plymouth to have the space that we have for the EOC. It's a very large training room where we're capable of not only hosting training, but we can have large meetings there. We can have high-level meetings if needed. So we are bringing it to the 21st century, like you said, and we are going to be creating a video wall, 9-screen video wall.
Okay.
And it's going to be fully microphoned up top, and it'll be able to project for remote learning, remote teaching, video conferencing, so if you're in your office down at Town Hall, fire chief, police chief, or with myself down there, we can video conference. That probably won't be completed until March or April, but we did already do our upgrade in the conference room, with 2 65-inch monitors, fully remote, fully capable of teleconferencing, and it just adds a level that we should be at.
Right.
We should be able to have clear-cut video conferencing.
Right.
And we shouldn't always have to rely on cell phones or regular phones or smart boards at that stage anyway.
Right. Oh yeah, no, you're 100% right. I mean, with today's technology, especially since the Zoom era, we should be able to do that. And honestly, the town of Plymouth is so fortunate that they have the ability to have an EOC with that like state-of-the-art technology. Because again, having worked in multiple communities, most communities don't have what the town of Plymouth has. So we're very fortunate.
We are. And from dealing with MEMA on an almost daily interaction, they constantly remind me of how lucky we are because there are no other ones. We are apparently going to be the premier on the South Shore.
Really?
We've utilized that space in the last year to allow MEMA to conduct their own training, separate fully from Plymouth. The United States Coast Guard did a full 2-day evolution with over 75 people there doing, a full-scale training exercise that they wanted to complete. So it is only a benefit to the surrounding towns and areas that they could have a training facility that if they ever need to use it as well.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great place. And, again, I think the residents may not be aware of it, but to know that we have the capabilities and the functionality to respond and recover from these types of events is super important. So Christian, I know that we probably only have a few minutes left, but you've taken the lead, and thank you for taking the lead on behalf of this community relative to the issue of the migrants who have been relocated by the state back in, when was that? November?
It was right before, it was before Halloween.
Okay, so we're back in October. We were made a few promises by state officials that things have changed.
Yes.
We were told originally that the folks are just going to be here for a couple of months and they would be relocated out of this community by January 1st. That hasn't happened. Correct. So do you mind, again, you're running point on this on behalf of this community. Do you mind giving us an update on what's going on with the migrant situation?
Yes, sir. We have currently approximately 46 families in town that have been displaced and relocated here with approximately 140 people in total, varying ages, whether or not school age or younger. The ones that are school age, have worked with the school department, have been enrolled, and we have had some families leave the town already to go to different parts of the state, whatever the case may be. I don't see an end. We know that there are just a large amount of families in the state of Massachusetts, and it's going to, these numbers are probably going to fluctuate for the foreseeable future.
Really. Well, and I want to say it was in late November, the state had set up like a reception center up at Devon's, the old Army facility. And so once I saw that, that was a clear indication to me that the state of Massachusetts as a whole was going to continue to receive more and more migrants. Correct. And, they come from all different places. But we are a right to shelter state. Yep. I think we're one of two in the entire country. And because of that, this law of right to shelter, the state is required to find homes for these people.
Yes, sir. But I will say that NeighborWorks has been the lead agency for the state, and they have, provided timely updates and kept me in the loop with it. But the people of Plymouth, in the beginning when we were asking for donations, were outstanding. They dropped off everything that we had possibly asked for. I coordinated all the efforts to get them delivered to NeighborWorks so they can disperse them with the families. So the people of Plymouth, even though another agency is taking the lead on this, our townspeople did a great job, by responding and giving donations.
And are they still accepting donations?
Not at this time.
They're not accepting donations.
They're waiting, to process everything that they have and see what is needed. And then I think they will, they'll reach out shortly and we'll go from there.
And circling back to your last, one of your first comments about reimbursement, we've talked recently, there's been, beyond schools, there's been some other resources required. And so we'll be tracking that and trying to seek reimbursement. So I just want folks to be aware that, we plan at some point to try to seek reimbursement through the state officials on this issue as well. So Christian, I know we're running short of time, and I really wanted to thank you for coming on today's episode. And for the folks at home, if you want to learn more about emergency preparedness and what you can do and the tips that we can provide, just go to any one of the websites that Christian talked about, but one in particular is a town website at www.plymouth-ma.gov. From there, there's a bunch of links that you can gain access to all this information. So again, Christian, thank you for coming, and next time we see you, hopefully we'll drag Chief Foley on with us as well. So
good luck with that, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So thank you all, and see you next week.